Coming up, a Sad Styles production.
Hello and welcome. My name's Mikey Aaronworth, signing on to the Sign Off, a Frameworth podcast. Now, look, we've had a solid couple of weeks with guests from the very beginning of the show lined up, but there's a story that we wanted to tell on this podcast that was kind of the inspiration to even turn the microphones on in the first place. We've hinted at this story on past episodes, but we haven't given too many details, and it has to do with a situation in which my dad, Brian Aaronworth, the president of Frameworth, lost a superstar, an NHL Superstar's game-used collection of their own jerseys. Now, we're going to get into the details of what happened in a little bit, and it's a solid 45 minutes that you're not going to want to miss. But before we do that, I have some housekeeping to do. I wanted to give one more shout-out to the Facebook group we were talking about on an earlier episode of this podcast. Now, it's a group called Sidney Crosby Memorabilia Collectors on Facebook, and it's run by Matt Ellenberger, a friend of Frameworth and a friend of the podcast. There was such a large reception to this competition that we ran, where you essentially just had to listen to the podcast and subscribe, and you were entered in a chance to win a signed Sidney Crosby jersey. And I wanted to give a quick shout out to Will Edward, the winner of this jersey. Congratulations. No scam. Here we are. I'm announcing it live on air. If you have a group or a segment of people that you want to take part in some sort of giveaway or promotion like this, hit us up. signoffpod@frameworth.com. Also, if you have any questions you want us to address on air, hit us up through the same way. We'll get to those right away. And maybe you'll have a chance to join us live as we record this podcast. Now, I've done more talking than I usually do in the introduction, which is a shame because there is so much story to get to. I have seen my dad tell this story in front of some of the most important people I've ever come across. One of those such people is Wayne Gretzky, and he has all of them eating out of the palm of his hands when he tells this story because the circumstances are dire, the potential for failure is enormous, and you just can't believe that someone has A, found themselves in this situation, and B, tries to manage to find a way out. So without further ado, I'm going to take a break and we will see you guys on the other side. And welcome back to the Sign Off. We're here once again, just one short week away from our last recording where it was me, Mikey Aaronworth, and my dad, president of Frameworth Sports Marketing, Brian Aaronworth, here joining us as well. Wave to the camera. Give them a little hello. And that's a little reminder, if you're listening to this on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, any of those things, we are also available on YouTube. We record every episode in video, especially when we have some of the guests on, as if our pretty faces weren't enough to keep you guys excited and engaged. But today is, listen, I can say this at the beginning of every episode, and I probably will, another very exciting episode. And the reason for that is eventually we're going to be getting into maybe my favorite story in the history of Frameworth. Mainly because of the way that it ended.
Thank God.
If it didn't end this way, and you'll know what we're talking about in a little bit, but if it didn't end this way, it could have been absolutely catastrophic. But the company kind of got together, found out some solutions, and made this work in our favor. I know you're probably just chomping at the bit to hear what it is we're talking about, but that's a teaser to lead us into it, because when we're in this world of sports marketing and we're dealing with athletes and very high-profile people, listen, we all make mistakes. You, Dad, and Mom made a mistake, which came to bear fruit on February 3rd, 1989 in the form of Mikey Aaronworth, co-host of the Sign Off podcast. But we all make some mistakes. We all trip up at some points, and sometimes the scope and scale of that is a lot larger, especially when you're dealing with people of a certain caliber or prominence in an industry. We have our reputation to protect. We work with these people quite often, and for as large of an industry it is, word gets around. So what are your thoughts then on dealing with some of these high-profile people, companies? You know, we're dealing with MLSE, for example, and when we potentially drop the ball, the ramifications can be enormous. Do you lose sleep over that? Is that something with an added sense of responsibility?
Well, I was in at 5:30 this morning. It is Sunday.
Yeah,
when we're recording this,
a nice cool Sunday afternoon.
Just wake up and start thinking about things. Now, you know, things have over the years have gotten a lot better and smoother, et cetera, but there's always something that can go wrong. Some can be devastating. Yeah. You just have to kind of keep thinking about it, keep your eye on the ball, and make sure that nothing does go wrong, but inevitably it will.
What are the kinds of things that you worry about losing track of? What are the sort of plate spinning elements that keep you up at night? Is it more on a relationship athlete to athlete basis, or is it with our customers and clients and something like that? It's all of it.
Yeah. I mean, starting with, we're dealing with a lot of expensive product, a lot of which is ours, a lot of which is other people's. We're framing up jerseys. We frame a lot of NHL players' jerseys.
Right.
And we're known to be the Cadillac of the industry. So when players...
Cadillac's a weird reference. I feel like we should update that reference a little bit.
maybe Ferrari.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's an old Cadillac. It used to be.
We're the Cadillac of our industry. Our grandparents drive us.
Yeah. So we ended up, framing. We do. A lot of the players will come to us. We just did some for Sandheim, and Gary Roberts just called me to do some framing. They trust us to do the job right. Now we're utilizing their products, and not just players, but other people's. We get Gretzky jerseys. We get all sorts of expensive things in that belong to customers and ourselves, and we've got to frame them, and anything can go wrong. You want to make sure your employees aren't drinking coffee by their workstations and stuff. Anything can go wrong. And when it does, you've got to pay the piper, and that can be very expensive.
And it does kind of bring on an entire new level of stress when we're dealing with customers' own products or players' own products, things like that, especially when there's a sentimental value to it. You had mentioned, I can't remember which episode it was. I think it was the episode with Ken Reed, and we started talking about game-worn jerseys and is there value in cutting them up and putting them on cards. And I think it was a Ted Williams jersey that you refused to cut up.
Yep.
Now, the flip side of that is maybe you do agree to take on the jersey and just frame it up as per usual. Now you're taking on the responsibility of handling a essentially priceless item. And if something goes wrong, the customer is going to be claiming the highest possible value for it. So do you lose sleep also on just like the individual walk-in customers with items of their own? Or is that kind of something that you can't worry about all of it, so you got to sort of put your focus elsewhere?
No, it's part of the business. It's part of what we've done from day one. And as time has gone on and our reputation gets better, then people entrust us with more and more expensive things. And recently we've just done some very expensive things. And even now Sidney Crosby jerseys are valued at $2,000, $2,500 retail.
Non-game worn.
Right.
So you can imagine the game worn stuff yeah.
And Wayne Gretzky's product from Upper Deck is up there, $2,500 US retail. So those are things that come and go. And if you drop it on the floor or something happens to it, then you're responsible for it.
Yeah.
So you really have to be careful. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is when you maybe screw up with something you say or do. Even on this podcast, I'm very conscious of
how you pronounce the word conscience.
Exactly. of saying something that might be damaging or that shouldn't be said on a podcast. We're trying to give you a lot of insight on this podcast, but I certainly don't want to say something that's contrary to the brand of the players that we work with.
Very true.
So each player is their own brand, and they behave a certain way, and they want us to be consistent with that, which is why we work with so many players, because they know they can trust us on it. But if you make a mistake and you slip up and you say something wrong,
it's out there.
Yeah.
It's out there. Now, okay, so when one walk-in customer comes in and they have one game-worn jersey that they got from one player, that becomes a very special possession to that person. There's nothing personal in it necessarily, but it's valuable to them, and it's a piece of history. Now, what if, on the flip side, one of your clients, in the form of, say, an athlete, comes in with not just one game-used jersey, but the collection of every game-used jersey they've ever felt was important enough for them to keep? Say maybe it's a young hotshot player in the NHL named Rick Nash, and we're sort of courting him to see whether or not we can be his representatives in the field of sports marketing and memorabilia. Does this ring a bell? Is this something that may have happened to you at some point?
Probably the most devastating thing that could have happened to the company in the whole time period that we were here. And I actually have told this story to other NHL hockey players.
Yeah.
And they sit in awe and can't believe that this story is true, but it is.
It is. And listen, if you're listening to us right now, you're about to get into it. This is something that it's a story that I love hearing. Like, you know this already if you're listening to this podcast. I love speaking. It's one of my favorite things to do. But this is one of the rare cases where I love listening to you tell this story, because the amount of detail that goes into how this all went wrong and what Frameworth as a company did to rectify it is mind-blowing. And we're going to get into it in detail here. So why don't we start off? What is going on in Frameworth, at Frameworth, that gets you involved with Rick Nash at the time?
Well, we're going back, I think it's 2003.
Mm-hmm. A pretty important year for the company, if you've heard our recent episodes.
Yeah, and some things had happened during that time frame. My brother passed away, your uncle.
Yep.
So we were also getting into a little sideline business of event marketing.
Yeah.
So I put my expertise. I went to a lot of celebrity golf tournaments that we were invited to, NHL tournaments, the NHL alumni had tournaments. So I decided that we would raise some money for the Cancer Society by having our own golf tournament.
Yep.
And I pulled in all of the favors that I had ever done for anybody to try and get some really great players there.
Right.
So it was going to be a Pro-Am tournament. I never asked people for anything, but this is for my brother, and it's something that was very near and dear to me. So I just discarded that kind of don't ask anybody for anything.
Right. This is when you're collecting. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So a very good friend of mine, and he will be on the show at some point, Brad Jansen.
A character. You guys are going to love when we bring him on. He's got stories up the wazoo. The
history behind Brad and how he's evolved through this industry and how he's helped me evolve Frameworth is so cool.
He's the kind of guy where when you walk into a room with him and there are players in there and you're excited to see the players are excited to see him. He has that kind of vibe to him.
Yes, and I can't get into all the other stories. We'll wait for him to show up here. But Brad was good friends with Rick Nash and had Rick, I believe, Brad was in the sports equipment business, and I believe at that point he had just signed Rick Nash, who was like really an not up and coming. He was already there.
Yeah.
I think he had.
This is after his goal leading season.
I think he was MVP in the All-Star game and all that stuff. So, so I asked Brad for a favor to see if he could get a couple of guys to come to the tournament, and he asked Rick, and Rick graciously said yes. Now, Rick was just going to Columbus at the time. So Brad said, you know what, by the way, Rick's just bought a new home in Columbus, and wondered if you could frame up some jerseys for him.
Right.
So I said, oh, absolutely. I won't even charge him because he's showing up at the tournament, and that was great.
Did you know at the time when he says frame up some jerseys, did you know what was coming your way or how many jerseys were coming your way?
No. So in fact, I just pulled into the tournament was held at Eagles Nest, with a great course north of the city here
in Toronto. Yep. Or just outside of Toronto.
Yeah. And pulled in, and Brad happened to be pulling in at the same time with Rick in the car. And he says, oh, open your trunk.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, oh, are these the jerseys that he wanted framed? He said, yeah. He says, and he hands over two big garbage bags full of jerseys. Throw them in the trunk. I said, take them back. But this was before the tournament, so we're going to go play golf. And so the next day, I come back with the jerseys. We had the golf tournament. It was a great event. Everybody showed up for that.
That was, I was there as well. That was a phenomenal event. I remember at that event, actually, you had put a lot of time and effort. Again, for the listener, this was a golf tournament that was put on in memory of your brother, my uncle, Jeff Aaronworth. Yeah. And it was almost a means of mourning or closure for you. I'd always assumed, at least. You put a lot of work into it to kind of put your stamp on it.
Wanted to make this thing really special. We had Daryl Sittler, Bobby Hull. We had George Chiavallo. Dennis Hull was the MC.
Yeah.
It was a really and everybody got to play with a celebrity.
Yeah.
So it was a great event. Jerry Cheevers, you name it. especially back in 2003, where those alumni players were just kind of finishing their career, so they were even more known to the average person.
Yeah, and I remember you had a lot on your mind, and you were super busy, and maybe a little bit flustered, and you finished golf, and after the golf had happened, like all the players had come back and come back into to kind of shower up before the evening's events with the dinner and the auctions and all that stuff. You go down and you shower and you come back upstairs to the lobby to go shake hands and kiss babies, or kiss babies and shake hands, I guess. And you have this like Arlene Dickinson style gray streak through your hair. And I remember seeing you and thinking like, wow, like you must have been really stressed out about this. You have gray hair now. What had happened is you thought you were spraying hairspray in your hair and instead had sprayed spray-on deodorant in your hair and had this big silver streak going through.
Didn't even know it. I was so wrapped up in the tournament. Somebody had to send me back down to try and get this stuff out of my hair.
Yeah, we took our pictures and then had our fun, and then we told you that you had it in your hair. But yeah.
Exactly. So the tournament's over. I head back. I'm an early riser, so I'm in the office fairly early, and I'm sitting there through the day. And about 10 o'clock, my foreman comes in, who's still with me today, and best employee ever.
Mono. Okay. Well,
Mono.
hey, by the way, his son and also employee. So
yeah, exactly.
But also, I agree with you.
Yeah. So Mono comes through, and I said, "Oh, Mono, would you do me a favor? Here's the keys to my car. Could you bring those garbage bags of jerseys and put them in the showroom so that Steve, our creative director here, can style them up, frame them, get them ready for framing." Mm-hmm. And so he does that and brings the keys back, and I'm ready to go do the rest of the work. And then the next morning at about 5 o'clock in the morning, I remember waking up and saying, gee, no, but Steve never came back to me to ask how I wanted those things framed.
Right.
I said, that's really strange because he's very efficient. So I said, I'm thinking, well, he should have had those. You can't miss those two big garbage bags full of garbage bags. Garbage bags full of jerseys, and my heart stopped. I said, no, that just couldn't happen. How could anybody mistake that? So I come into the office, and I'm on pins and needles, and I'm waiting for Mono to come in, who also comes in fairly early, but I'm in at 6:30. He comes in at 8. And I said to him, Mono, where did you put that the jerseys that I gave you? He says, what jerseys? I said, the two garbage bags full of jerseys that were in my trunk. He says, oh, my God. He says, I thought that was garbage. I said, why would I bring garbage back from a golf tournament?
In your trunk.
He says, I don't know, but I thought it was garbage, so I threw them in the dumpster. I almost threw up on the spot. I said, my foreman or my general manager was in at the time. I grab him, and I said, we got to go, and we run to the back door, fling open the door
of the dumpster,
shipping door where the dumpster is, and I look in, and the dumpster is empty. I get shivers when I
just thinking about it. Thinking about it again. So, keep in mind, did you know at this point how many jerseys there would have been, or
no? But you got to figure there's two. This is, according to what I found out later, this is his whole life's collection of every jersey that he's ever worn.
Every jersey, not every jersey he's ever worn, but every jersey that he's figured would be important enough to keep.
Right.
So
now I'm looking at this empty dumpster, and I tell my general manager at the time, Chris, I said, Chris, get on the phone and find out where they take this garbage to. We got to stop them from dumping it.
Right.
And so he does. It's I guess these companies are open fairly early too. It's now about 8:30, and I am just beside myself. He comes back and he says, well, the good news is our company that picks up the garbage is up at Highway 7 and Woodbine.
Right.
Which isn't too far away. So I said, okay, I grab everybody from the plant that I can. There's about 7-8 people, figuring they dumped it up at Woodbine and 7.
Right.
And we hop into 2 cars. I had just bought a brand new BMW. I'll get into that later. And I take as many as I can in my car, and then my other foreman takes as many as he can in his car.
Now, what was your intention at this time? Well, like what did you think you guys
I'm
were
going
for?
up there to dig through the garbage or find out where they dump this stuff.
Right,
Because
right.
I'm thinking it's Highway 7, and which is about, I don't know, 20 miles away from here, 20
Right.
kilometers. So we end up going into the offices, and I don't want to tell them what we're missing, because maybe somebody's going to go
Look
grab
for
the
it.
jerseys and keep them.
Take them
right?
for themselves. Yeah.
So I'm just saying we lost something very important. I got to get the garbage bags back. And the lady looks at me like I have two heads. She says, well, the garbage isn't here. And I said, what do you mean it's not here? They told us. They said, this is our offices.
Yeah.
So those trucks come in. They take the stuff across the street to this big dump. They dump it out. And then these other big trucks bulldoze it into the trucks, and they take it off to 2 or 3 dumps
Right.
around the country. I said, what do you mean? She says, well, the owner of the company, or one of the big managers, he'll explain, but they're in a meeting for about another 40 minutes, so we can't disturb them. Now I'm dying.
Now you got to wait 40 minutes.
40
and
minutes.
just-
I don't know where they are.
Is that the longest 40 minutes of your life?
I
Is that-
remember picking up the phone to Brad,
Yeah.
and he
Brad
said,
again being the
my
rep for-
buddy that
yeah.
set me up with this,
Yeah.
and he had just signed a deal with Rick for sticks, so now and I said, Brad, I got a problem. He says, what's the problem? I told him the story. The jerseys are missing. He said, they went in the garbage. And Brad's not the calmest guy in the world. The F-bomb started flying. You get those goddamn jerseys back, I'll fucking kill you. I'll do whatever it's going to be, right?
And it's worth saying that this relationship you had with Brad Jansen was not just a professional one. You guys were good friends. Like we were
best
and
friends.
still are. Like you
Yeah.
guys talk all the time, which I guess kind of foreshadows the potential end of the story. But it's important to bring up because Brad wasn't likely to just drop F-bombs and stuff like this unless the situation were as dire as one like this.
Not at me. And first of all, he's worried about his contract and his relationship with Rick Nash. I then got off I said, Brad, what do you want me to do? I'm waiting for the people. I'll tell you what he says, I don't care what it takes, but you get those jerseys back. Now I get off the phone to my insurance agent.
Right.
And I asked him, I said, what happens if we lose these jerseys? And I told him the circumstances. I said, are we insured? He said, no. Now I'm thinking, not for something like this, I'm thinking, this is my company down the tubes.
Yeah.
Like if we lose these jerseys and Rick sues me,
Yeah.
I've got no recourse.
Right.
So now I'm absolutely desperate. And I'm waiting, and the guys finally came, and I told them, I said, we lost this stuff. It's really important.
The guys who were in the meeting, like the management.
Yeah, the management. And he says, he kind of poo-pooed it, and it's not going to, there's not much we can do.
Did he give you the impression that anyone his entire life had ever come to him with a proposition like this?
Well,
saying, I need to go.
One, I didn't tell him what it was at first.
Right.
And then he says, look, these jerseys could have gone to one of 3 sites. And I said, well, then at one point I just said, I got to tell him what it is and tell him how important it is.
For sure.
I said, are you a hockey fan? He said, yeah. And I told him, this is Rick Nash's game-worn jerseys from his career. He says, I don't want to say this to you, but he said, last week a lady came in looking for a paper bag that she had $20,000 in from her wedding.
Oh, my God.
And it mistakenly got thrown in the garbage. She said, never got found.
Oh, my God.
So that didn't make me feel too
No,
good.
of course not.
So he said, but I'll tell you what I'll do
Especially
for you.
because somehow these 2 garbage bags would be worth way more than that small paper bag of $20,000.
Now, back in those days, it was a game-worn jersey. I didn't know, but today.
Yeah.
So he says, well, you know what? They went to one of 3 dumps. One's in Detroit, one's up in Thunder Bay or something, and one's in London, Ontario.
Right.
He says, if it's in Detroit, you got no hope. They won't let you anywhere near that site. By this time, it's on its way, whatever. It's now about 11 o'clock in the morning. The stuff got picked up the night before, so it's probably at the dump by then.
Yeah.
He said, the one in Thunder Bay, probably not. That's, I don't know what it was, 8 hours away or something like that.
Yeah.
He says, I will phone the one in London. I said, well, Rick Nash played for the London Knights, so I said, maybe somebody there knows, maybe they'll go out of their way or whatever. So he phones the site, and I said, tell him I'll pay whatever it takes, stop dumping stuff.
Yeah.
The good news about garbage companies is they know exactly where the trucks are going, what quadrant.
Very organized.
Right.
Yeah.
So the truck goes, so he comes back about 25 minutes later, and he says, good news, they went to where they're dumping it. They found a jersey, one of his jerseys, in the dump. He said, doesn't mean they all went there, but most likely they did.
Right.
I said,
so basically they have the ability to know where it would have been picked up, where then at the central sorting agency the garbage would have been, and then from there where it likely would have been dumped at the end location.
End.
That is an insane level. It's almost like if you gave them 2 garbage bags full of a player's jerseys, they probably wouldn't have lost it in the first place.
It was nuts. So now I'm going to preface this by saying it is a Friday of the long weekend in July, and if you look back and check the record books, this was one of the hottest days in years. It got up to about 100 degrees.
I think it was the hottest day on record for that day in Toronto's history.
Right.
Which, when you know you're about to be going to a dump, is not what you want to hear.
No. And then I'm thinking, okay, tell them to stop dumping. I will pay whatever the fees are, whatever it takes to stop dumping. I said, we're on our way. And we start driving down there. 2 carloads full of people. There's probably 8 of us.
Well, first of all, because you were gathering a group of people together. You were like the beginning of an Ocean's 11 movie. You had like a whiteboard. You're gathering. You're putting the crew together, right?
Right.
And you go in. My brother at the time, Chris, was working for the company and wasn't really loving the role that he was in.
We put him in the factory.
Put him in the factory, and he was a young kid at the time and wanted to be out doing other things. And he was so miserable doing what he was doing that when he heard that there was an opportunity to leave the office, even though it meant trudging through trash in the hottest day on record, he volunteered quicker than anyone else.
He was in the car. He was loving it. He says it was the most exciting thing he's done all summer.
As a field trip, and he didn't even have to get a note from his parents. It was great.
So I gather all these people, and we head straight to London. And on the way, we stopped at a Walmart and I bought everybody work boots, helmets, whatever it took that I thought that they would make sure that we had to have on to get onto a work site.
Right. You don't want to show up and them say, it's great that you have 20 people, but you don't have your boot. You need your steel toe shoes.
Right.
You need,
So everybody got new equipment, and then we head to the site. And they lead us out to the quadrant where they had dumped the jerseys.
Did they charge you anything to stop the dumping or no?
No. The guy was these were really nice people.
Yeah.
The dumps in London, again, Rick played there.
Yep.
So they all knew about it, and they were all happy to help out and see if we could recover these things. So we pull up in the quadrant, and there's literally a mountain of garbage. God. We had to climb up, 50 feet to get to the top of the mountain.
50 feet of garbage.
Of garbage.
Oh, my God.
We opened the car door. It's now about 95 degrees at noon, and it smells so bad that Chris got out of the car.
Chris, my brother, your son.
And threw up immediately. So now we go up to the top of the hill.
The good news is for him, he was actually hungover, and he just hit it by blaming the smell. No, not actually. Sorry, Chris.
We go up to the top of the hill, and we start digging.
Yeah.
We got pitchforks, but we got to be careful not to. It's like an architectural or archaeological site. So you got to be careful not to hurt or damage any of the goods. Yeah. And the crap that we're going through.
Literally, crap that you're going through.
And we find 1 jersey, and we find 2 jerseys. But the problem is, Rick is now in Las Vegas celebrating his 21st birthday.
So tell this. So when you were speaking to Brad that first time, before he basically said, call me when it's solved or don't call me at all. He basically laid out that ultimatum because you had asked him whether or not he could check with Rick to see
how many jerseys we're looking for.
Yeah. We didn't know. All we received was 2 garbage bags full of jerseys, and we didn't know how many were there, what they were, what colors they were to look for. And Brad said to you,
I'm not bothering Rick. He's celebrating his 20. I don't even want to bring it up to him. I'm not phoning his agent. It was Joe Resnick. He says, I'm not phoning the agent. I'm not phoning anybody. Just find the goddamn jerseys. You're not going to come back without them.
Because he's out in Vegas celebrating his 21st birthday. Rick Nash is.
Right.
Yeah. So while this is going on, Rick has no idea.
No idea, and we don't know how many jerseys we're looking for.
Right.
So we're there till about 4 o'clock. find one jersey here, one jersey there. I think we got up to 11 jerseys.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking that's not too bad. We even found some hockey socks, but I didn't think they belonged to him.
We also found a diaper. We were pretty sure that wasn't his. I don't know.
So now we get all these jerseys. Team Canada. I remember finding his All-Star jersey. We didn't know. Some of them didn't have names on them. So it was like he had his like Bantam jersey.
Oh, yeah.
All that. So we have about 11 jerseys. And then we get one of the guys that was from the company, the garbage company, come out to the site and said, sorry, boys, but you're going to have to leave. Now, keep in mind, after we found the 11th jersey, we searched for another hour and a half without finding any. And in fact, one guy climbed up into the dump truck and found a jersey up there about stuff that hadn't been dumped out yet.
Oh, wow.
But that was about it. And we hadn't found one in about an hour and a half. And we've dug down. I mean, how far down are you going to dig, right? So I said, maybe that's all there was. We haven't found any more. The first 11 came pretty easily. So I just said, you know what? It is what it is. We're not going to find any more. And he said, well, the reason we quit anyways was the guy says it's that hot a day. There's one of those summer thunderstorms coming in, lightning and thunder. You have to get off the site. If you want to come back, you're welcome to come back tomorrow. We'll stop digging here and doing whatever.
But now the garbage is going to be soggy and wet as well.
But it's a safety issue. You can't be on the site with the lightning coming in. So off we go. My brand new BMW. I had 4 guys in my car that had been working in the dump the whole time. They hadn't eaten all day.
Did they want to after all this?
Well, no, they were starved. And they were working hard.
Yeah.
And this car, I didn't even let the kids eat chicken McNuggets in my new car.
I can attest to that. There was no, if you know how sometimes when a kid has something to eat and it's like half an hour before you can go swimming, if we had anything to eat, we had to wait an hour before sitting in the back of your car because you were so protective over the way this thing smelled.
Now I got 4 guys that have been digging in a dump. The car just reeked. And we had the jerseys in the trunk, which was kind of permeating through the back seat. So now we're on our way back. We got to stop at the gas station on the way, get them something to eat.
Yep.
And while we're on the way back, I had a good friend that I golf with. His name's Bill Foley, and Bill had a Parker's Cleaners at the time.
Oh.
So I phoned Bill and I say, Bill, we've got these jerseys. It's a Friday of a long weekend, but I said, you got to come meet me at your cleaning store. And we got to look at these because I got to get every stain, anything that's on them, I got to get off. They got to be brand new, back to their original shape.
Yeah.
So we go back. We bring it all back, and the 11 jerseys, I'm sitting there, and he's looking at the stains. He said, Brian, he says, I can get these out, but it's almost like a toothbrush with cleaning. You can't just put them in a machine, get them out. We have to, spend hours. I said, Bill, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Just do it for me.
Yeah.
So he says, fine.
How dirty were the jerseys of this? Were they?
There was little stains and things on them. They were actually not too bad, but they were dirty.
Yeah,
They were sitting in a dump, right? And some of them were below surface.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, I'll do that for you. There was actually, the good news was there was not a lot of damage. There was no damage to them, right? So
for the most part, I thought there was one jersey. No,
one was a little torn and that, but we that was fine. Had a little hole in it. So that's being done. I'm devastated, but we found 11. I don't know how many are there, but we're going to be okay.
Yep.
Now I'm just beat up. I play golf every Saturday morning. So I phoned Brad and told him we got 11. I don't know how many are there, but that's all we could find. He said, okay, well, that's the best you can do. And he couldn't believe, actually, after giving me all that crap, that we actually did that when I told him the story of how we were on the dump on the hottest day of the year.
Sure.
Blah, blah, blah. So he was pretty amazed that we went that far and happy that we found 11 jerseys. I'm playing golf the next morning. I'm coming through the nines.
How are you golfing that day?
Not well.
I was going to say, your mind may have been a little bit elsewhere. Yeah.
And I get a phone call coming through the nines where I pick up my phone because I didn't typically have it. You weren't allowed to use it. So I checked my messages. And it was Mono, my foreman.
Yeah.
And he says, good news. I said, what do you mean good news? He says, well, we found 10 more jerseys. I said, you what? Where are you? He says, well, I took the crew back to
Wow.
London. Didn't tell me.
Wow.
He felt so bad about throwing them out in the garbage in the first place that he took the same crew back, or at least 5 of the guys, and if they found 10 more jerseys, they had to be digging 3 feet down.
Yeah.
Right? Because we couldn't find them for an hour and a half. That brought it up to 21. Now I know we got to be close.
Have to be.
Right?
How many more jerseys can you fit in 2 garbage bags?
So I phoned Bill. We go back, blah, blah, blah. We end up getting all these jerseys cleaned. I bring them back to the office. I get them all framed up. And then by that time, it's about 4 or 5 days later, Rick comes back to the city. And I said, Brad, bring them in. And he says, okay. And Rick's sitting in my office.
Now, did Brad tell him anything?
No, nothing.
Nothing. So Rick's coming in here just expecting...
To see whether we did a nice framing job.
Not whether you had his jerseys.
So I had 21, and I don't even know. We still don't know if any are missing.
Okay. At this point in time. Yeah,
we know we got 21. There could have been 25.
Right.
So Rick is in my office, and I start going through the story. And his mouth just drops. Like, I don't know whether he's going to jump over the table and pound me out.
Yeah.
Or whether he's thrilled that we found some. But I went through the whole story and said, now we've got 21 jerseys. I don't know if there's any missing, and I apologize if there are. And he looked at me. What a nice guy. I was so worried about having this conversation. He looked at me and he said, I can't believe you went to all that trouble to get my jerseys back. He says, I can't believe you did that. He said, you're amazing. He was complimenting me. I said, I threw your jerseys out. I lost your jerseys. I said, how about we do this? We go into the showroom, and I said, we're going to look at all the jerseys and see if you can tell me if there's any missing.
Sure.
And he walked around the show. They were all framed, looking gorgeous.
Yeah.
And
cleaned with
up
a toothbrush.
And he looks through it. And
the first thing he says is, what stinks?
No, we got all the smell out. So he looked at him, and whether he was just being gracious or not, but I don't think so. He said, there's only one jersey missing, and that's one I didn't care about. So I went, oh, my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So I said to Rick, I said, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. One, you're not paying for any of this.
Right.
Okay, so 21 jerseys was quite a bit of money for me at the time.
Yeah.
And I said, and my foreman, Mono, who is a superstar, made that one little mistake, but
which
it
is
wasn't
basically
really
the only mistake he's ever made.
I mean, he's like the best employee. So I said, we're going to send him to Columbus with all the jerseys. We're not letting him out of our sight.
Right.
And he's going to hang them all wherever you want them, so it's all professionally done.
Yep.
And he spent a couple of days going down to Columbus, hanging the jerseys and getting them
Yep.
ready. And that's the Rick Nash story.
That is amazing.
And my wife says, if you write a book, the chapter's got to be called Rick Trash.
I made that name up.
Oh, was
I
that
made
you?
that name. Come
Oh,
on.
okay,
The
sorry.
listeners will know by this point that no good puns get past me. That's about all that I'm good for here. I can't believe I know how that story ends, and I'm on pins and needles every time I hear about it. What was Brad Jansen's reaction by the end of it?
I think he gave me a big hug and a kiss. Brad was a very intense personality.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
I mean, that was Brad.
Yep.
I mean, he's friends with all the players. He knows everybody from Wayne Gretzky, and that's a whole other story. We'll get Brad's take on this too.
Well, I was going to say, so I was going to kind of tease this at the end, but you've heard our perspective and the scared perspective that we had throughout all of this. If you want to hear the perspective of the person who would have had to bear the brunt of that news to his newly signed client in Rick Nash, Brad will come on the podcast in a couple weeks' time and give his perspective, which is as unique a perspective, I think, as you can get. You know, you have us scrambling to do it, and you have someone else who thinks that one of his best friends just screwed him out of the best relationship that he could have with an athlete.
Well, Brad's whole reputation was all about doing things right for the players,
Sure,
and
of course.
Brad's was very anal about making sure nothing went wrong. So this was beyond his control. But I do have to mention, and I've said this already, how gracious Rick Nash was.
Yeah.
What a gentleman he was. I mean, he could have taken me to task. He could have sued us. He could have done whatever he wanted. Well, I mean, we got all the jerseys back for the most part, but he was just so gracious and almost in awe of the the trouble we went through to get through. But it was one of the most harrowing days I have ever spent in my life.
Yeah.
Not the most comfortable. I had to sell the car.
This is like the episode of Seinfeld with the BO. Yeah,
it never
was
got
about
rid of
that.
it.
No, but it's amazing because I recall that at the end of this, not only was Rick Nash, gracious and very understanding about the situation, and I think that kind of speaks to what we've already spoken about on this podcast, which is the majority of the athletes, like the vast majority of the athletes that we deal with, in particular in hockey, are just some of the not just good people for famous athletes, but just salt of the earth human beings.
Yeah.
You could, think about someone like Jonathan Toews when we have a signing with him, for example, and he's hard to get out of the room so that we can clean up after the signing because he wants to be there to help us. Like, dude, you've got things to do. Like, everyone we deal with, Sydney's no different. Like, everyone we get in these rooms with just seem to go out of their way to be the best humans that they can. And I remember at the end of this, didn't we actually sign a deal with Rick Nash?
Yes.
For his exclusive autograph rights at the end of that?
He was so thrilled that made the deal. It was an autograph deal that we did at the time. And of course, he was such a great player, a great star. But for him to stay on with us.
Yeah.
And the fact that we actually did framing for other players and still continue to do that. They know, well, maybe lightning doesn't strike twice. It never struck us on the dump site.
On the dump site, the lightning didn't. Oh, man.
Although I was kind of maybe hoping it wouldn't put me out of my misery.
Put you out of your misery. I see, that's one of those things that I worry, you find yourself in these situations and there is just no out. You either face the music or you do it. And as a kid, I remember growing up and it was impossible to not get something done because you would always say, Mikey, there's always a way to get it done. If I said I didn't do something and you said, why not? Everything that I said afterwards didn't matter because if you wanted to get it done enough, you could have, is what you would.
That's always been my mantra. If you, there's always a way.
Yeah.
And if I was of the nature that I didn't believe that, I would have just, hey, you know how many people at that site at Woodbine and 7 told me, go home.
Yeah.
There's no chance you're going to get these back. Not a chance in the world.
Right.
They sent me home about 3 times. They said, I'm not leaving till I speak to the manager.
Right.
And, eventually he made a few phone calls for me. I begged, I pleaded, please make a call if there's any chance, whatever. And he did it. So yeah, there's always a solution to the problem if you put enough thought and effort into it.
Yeah, and it draws that thread that I didn't know we were going to be drawing when we started this podcast. But there's a large element of hard work that goes into solving this problem that you did. But there is an element of fortune, and it's very fortuitous that the jerseys ended up in the one of 3 dumps that we had access to in the first place. I remember them specifically saying if this went across the border to Detroit, or was it Windsor?
It was Detroit.
They said if it's Detroit, the U.S. is way more strict on who they'll allow on the dump site.
Yeah.
It's gone.
They
if it's
wouldn't
Thunder
care.
Bay, by the time you get there 8 hours away,
Not a chance.
it's gone. This was the only place it could have gone to.
Could have gone, and of course the people that were running that dump in London were big hockey fans. Knew Rick's.
Just so happens Rick played there.
Right.
It just the way that these things go. I mean, a lot of people I think get in that situation. The mistake happens, and they say, "Well, who could have predicted that a garbage bag is going to be thrown out? Like, never would have thought that's going to happen," and just left that like, well, nope. They told us that if it goes to 2 of the 3 that they can't, and even if it's at the 1, we're probably not going to get it. So I left. Like, look, what do you want me to do? You express surprise at the fact that Rick Nash and whomever was involved in this story were appreciative of the lengths that you went to get the jerseys back. But I do think that that's special.
Yes.
We started this off saying that everyone makes mistakes. That's common. That's so cliche that you hear it from grade 1 onwards. But not everyone goes to the lengths that you went to ensure that those mistakes are rectified. And that is very impressive. As soon as, like, how many people, by show of hands, and obviously we can't see you at home, but do this for us. Raise your hands. How many people have been within a mile of a dump, let alone trudging through it knee deep? It's a bizarre situation that you found yourself in.
Well, one of the things that I should point out, well, I have already pointed out, but what an amazing staff I have. I mean, I didn't go back to the dump the next day. I figured it was done. There's no way we're going to find it. To get that call on the 10th tee, while I'm playing golf, they're still digging through the dump.
Right.
My staff is the most amazing staff you could ever work with, Mono in particular, but everybody that went there and started searching and doing all that stuff. What a team.
Yeah.
And that's why I think our company is so successful. We've got a great team behind us.
Yeah, and you need that sort of thing. And this is one of those stories as well that you and I have traveled quite a bit in relation to the company and the business that we do, to all-star games, to meetings with larger clients and companies, and the number of times that someone in the room will have heard of this story and will ask you to tell it. And now you have all of the people who I would have been happy just to be sitting around hanging on your every word as you go through this. I'm talking athletes, players, presidents of clubs, everything. I mean, this is the kind of story that when we first talked about having a podcast, I was like, this one has to be told. I wanted to be told early. We considered having this as the first episode on the podcast.
No,
but
I think there.
I think you had some concerns about yeah.
You know, I've told that story to Wayne Gretzky, who sat in awe.
Yeah.
Like he just, Wayne's got a lot on his plate, and
of course,
people needing to see him and all that stuff. But he sat there for a good, I gave him a bit of abbreviated version.
Sure.
He sat there for a good 20 minutes and didn't say a word.
Yeah.
And it's happened to a number of other players too, because they just go, wow.
That's amazing. Now, whenever you have a new client coming in and asking you to frame some of their jerseys, do you tell them, do not put it in a garbage bag? What do you say to them? How do you prevent this from happening again?
There's not a garbage bag here that gets thrown out without somebody making sure that there's nothing in it.
There's an entire roll at Frameworth on their business card that says garbage checker.
Yeah.
And before it goes in there, it's a fantastic story. I love hearing that one. And we have tons of stories like that coming up. I mean, that one is among the best, but I can't wait, because for every one of those stories where something went wrong and we fixed it, there's a crazy story of fortune that and you just being right place, right time in a similar way, but without that kind of heart-wrenching moment of having lost the jerseys in the first place.
There's similar kind of interesting stories, but on a much more positive note.
Yeah,
for sure.
And we'll get into those in the coming weeks. In the meantime, like I said, keep an eye out, because in the next week or so, we're hoping to have Brad Jansen on to get his perspective, as well as just opening up another look at that realm of sports memorabilia and sports marketing, because he's been in equipment, representing equipment companies for a long time. He's worked with players on and off for his entire career, and he's got some very impressive stories as well.
Brad is one of the most interesting guys in the industry.
Yeah.
So, and he's agreed that he'll come on at some point, and his stories. The reason he's so popular with a lot of the players is he's just a hilarious guy too. I mean, he's just not an angry guy.
He's great telling the stories as well. Yeah,
great storyteller.
So that's good. I just wanted to say before we go out, as I mentioned, you can find us on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play Music. We are on every single podcast platform that's out there, as well as YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, hello again, I'm waving to the camera. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to Robert Savoy, I believe it's Savoy, who's been liking and commenting on all of our videos, always has some great insight. We notice those things quite a bit. They help out a lot. We're building up a great community over on Twitter at Frameworth Sport, Instagram at Frameworth Sports, and we'll have those accounts for you at the end of this episode as well. And send us any questions that you have that you want us to go over. signoffpod@frameworth.com. We can start to get into some of those listener-asked questions and give our expertise on that, or maybe just tell an interesting story that you may want us to tell. So with that, though, that's just about it for me. I'm Mikey Aaronworth. This is Brian Aaronworth, president of Frameworth Sports. Anything to say before we log off?
No, you know what, guys? I'm having a lot of fun doing this.
Yeah.
Mikey, you're doing a great job for us. Setting this up. I just leave my office, walk into the boardroom, and here we go. So thanks for all that. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to write a review and let us know how you're thinking or what you're thinking, and we'll try and address all that.
Absolutely. Sounds good. So again, Mikey Aaronworth for Brian Aaronworth. We are signing off. Yeah, I love that. I love hearing that story. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we made it to the end of yet another episode. Thanks again so much for joining us. You can find videos of all of our episodes on YouTube by searching the Sign Off Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at Frameworth Sport or Instagram at Frameworth Sports. And hey, if you're not sick of me yet, you can find me on Twitter over at Retrograde Mikey, or you can always find me embarrassing myself over on Instagram at Aaronworth. The Sign Off is a proud product of Fadoo Productions and Sad Styles Productions. Executive producers, Mikey Aaronworth and Andrew Bascom. Until next week, this is Mikey Aaronworth, signing off.
furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
Get into it!